Good evening. This is Maestro with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today, we have a 1v1 on Calderis Refinery. Our first player will be Wingblade, playing as the Chaos Lord. This is a tanky melee hero who can walk through cover and cannot be suppressed. And his opponent will be DanielGrushin, playing as the Lord Commissar, a slightly tanky melee hero who also functions a bit as a support hero. So I've seen these players before fairly recently. DanielGrushin was someone who I actually liked quite a bit for his chaos play in a recent faction war, and Wingblade I saw in a 1v1 game. So it'll be interesting to see both these players on different heroes than I saw them on before. I actually really like DanielGrushin's chaos play, so I'm a little disappointed to not see him on chaos, but let's also see how he handles the Imperial Guard. Now this matchup is one that, oh man, it's been so long. You know, I do feel like traditionally there is probably some way that Imperial Guard struggles in this matchup, but at least one of the things about this matchup that is a little bit easier for the Guard compared to other matchups is that Chaos generally has a lower range DPS opening than most other races, which means that Chaos is not quite as strong as putting early pressure on the Sentinel as several other races. And at the moment, we only see the single Chaos Space Marine squad from Wingblade. In fact, he doesn't even have another squad past that starting Chaos Space Marine squad. So Chaos Lord will be over here just chasing down the guardsmen, and he will eventually bleed a model, unless there is a retreat before that happens. And these guardsmen don't even have their sergeant yet, which means they're actually the most vulnerable to bleed than they ever will be. Whereas once they do get a sergeant, they start reinforcing at a 2-for-1 rate, making the guardsmen quite a bit more cost-effective. So as we see, a lot of the Imperial Guard opening relies on this synergy between the Sentinel and the Guardsman. It is, at this point, it's almost as old as time, and by as old as time, I mean about 9 years old, since I believe that's about how long Retribution has been out. Basically, the Sentinel steps forward, tanks damage, does damage, but the Sentinel does not bleed because it is considered a vehicle. Even though it does not have vehicle armor, it has heavy infantry armor. So it's still somewhat vulnerable to small arms fire, but it is also highly mobile, and generally speaking, a well-microed Sentinel should not really be killed in Tier 1. Like, if a Sentinel is killed in Tier 1, that almost strictly means it is a mistake by the Imperial Guard player. And that, I would say that's especially true in a matchup against Chaos, where, again, we have that lower overall range DPS compared to, say, Space Marines or Orcs, which are going to have much higher range DPS in their openings and are a lot better at putting pressure directly onto the Sentinel. DanielGrushin right now also winning out on map control. Part of that probably going to have to do with how many more units he purchased. He has triple guardsmen as well as the Sentinel, and all of the squads or units that DanielGrushin purchased are power-free squads. They're only purchased with requisition, so he was quicker to have them out on the field. Whereas Wingblade chose to get only 2 power-free squads compared to the 4 of DanielGrushin. He chose to make his third squad a squad of Raptors. So the Raptors will certainly hard counter the Guardsmen, but the Sentinel should also be there to really threaten the Raptors. Now, the Raptors are trying to dance around so that they don't get stomped by the Sentinel, but in doing that, they're also not really actually tying up the Guardsmen, and instead they are getting tied up. So right now, these engagements are feeling actually a little bit rough for Wingblade. He still has a squad of melee heretics, interestingly. And melee heretics are something... Oh my god, wow. How is this squad of heretics taking so much damage? It's going to go down in retreat. Ouch. Wow, that's a rather early heretic loss, especially considering it had an aspiring champion upgrade on it. But at any rate, the point that I was trying to make is that, or at least one point, typically melee heretics are very integral to the way Chaos is played. And in most other matchups, although grenade launcher heretics do have their uses, in most other matchups, You usually should always have at least one squad of melee heretics. I personally like to run around with 2 melee heretics almost permanently in almost every matchup except for Imperial Guard. Since those melee heretics against Imperial Guard won't have quite as much of a purpose, and it is a little bit more common to see grenade launcher heretics against the Imperial Guard, both because they are actually quite good against Imperial Guard squads, will typically bleed and damage a squad of guardsmen faster than the guardsmen will in return. And you do also have that disruption from the grenade barrage. But, you know, while I'm talking about builds and the matchup theory, we are seeing a pretty strong victory point lead for DanielGrushin. And again, a lot of that I think still goes back to the bigger build that he had, which just by its very nature gives him more map control. And since DanielGrushin also has more like redundant units, and basically by that I mean the fact that he has triple guardsmen, each of those guardsmen effectively serves the same purpose. So it's also easier for DanielGrushin to break off a single squad for the purpose of map control, whereas Wingblade, with each unit being very distinct, each one being, well, literally distinct, literally just different, they are each more critical to actually helping Wingblade win engagements. So Raptors are going to be focusing on the node, but the Commissar will start tying them up. And the Commissar has been upgraded here. He's got the Power Sword. So Power Sword does give him a 50 power melee DPS weapon, which is going to help anytime he gets in melee with either the Raptors or the Chaos Space Marines. He's going to be hitting them a lot harder than he would with his starting sword. In fact, it looks like he managed to kill a Raptor model over here. I mean, this is rough. They finally managed to jump out, because if they are just kiting him normally, eventually they will bleed, because that power melee sword is just nothing to joke about. You know, additionally, the Power Sword for the Commissar also gives him the lead by example ability, which is an ability that I've always personally liked very much, and it also is something that does allow him to directly counter those Raptors. Also works against the Heretics, since lead by example will cause the Commissar to do special attacks with every strike, somewhat similar to Battle Cry. Oh wow, Sentinel actually goes down just from the chase of the Chaos Lord. A little surprised to see that. As I said, typically, in my opinion, if a Sentinel does go down, that usually means a misplay from the Imperial Guard player. Usually should just not really happen in Tier 1. But, I mean, part of it is that Chaos Lord with the Combi Flamer actually does decent range damage. Does 31.61 piercing DPS. That is about as much as, say, 2 TAC models. A little bit more. And it does actually make the Chaos Lord a significant range threat, especially for someone so tanky and someone who is eventually going to make his goal to tie you up. So if you try to kite him, he actually ends up inflicting a lot of damage and bleed in return. Now, all things considered, the Sentinel is gone, but DanielGrushin was close to Tier 2, and then, although the Sentinel should live to Tier 2, it's often hard to make it live very long into Tier 2. I feel like with Doomblast, that actually could have been a wipe on this Guardsman squad. I'm not 100% sure. Ooh, could this be a wipe on the Chaos Lord? I don't think so. He's got too many hit points, unless the Commissar is able to target him. But I think the Commissar's got bigger problems. Commissar does have to worry himself about potentially going down. Now, with the Sentinel gone, this actually would leave Wingblade at a compositional advantage, and I'm not even accounting for the Blood Crusher that's out on the field. With only triple guardsmen, the Raptors can actually jump in pretty freely because they will never have to worry about getting stomped. I guess they could still have to worry about lead by example, but I think that's a little bit less impactful than the Sentinel stomp. My personal opinion, although they do work to similar effects. So Wingblade, estimating that he has a tech lead, he does have the Blood Crusher out, and often you do get a tech lead with the Chaos Lord if you go with a short build and you fast tech to Tier 2. Although he did have to account for, he did lose a few generators. And he's being pretty aggressive here, and he's actually starting to take some light damage. Actually took almost 150 hit points in damage on a unit that has vehicle armor, and a lot of that probably just coming out of the plasma guardsmen. So plasma does do light damage to vehicles. I think it is something like 20% of the guardsman's plasma damage will hit vehicles. So for example, if this is not the... Well, actually, let's take a look at the exact stat. 8.24 plasma DPS. That's not an easy number to do some caster math right in the moment. 8.24, 3 of those, 24. 10% of that is 4.8, right? Oh, grenade's going to go in. Nice grenade, not really dodged. But basically, a plasma guardsman squad would do 4.8 DPS to a blood crusher, and then maybe a little bit from the piercing, but very negligible. The piercing las guns might push it to 4.9 because piercing is really that negligible against vehicle armor. Armor of Khorne is coming out. Is that going to be the Armor of the Inferno? Yeah, pretty much a classic, and particularly against Imperial Guard, I really couldn't see the Chaos Lord going any other war gear. It would have to be extremely situational for the Chaos Lord to go a war gear other than Armor of the Inferno. Like, you would have to see a situation where, like, Guardsman squads have already been wiped, and the Guardsman player focuses, like, on Ogryn builds or something. Otherwise, Let the Galaxy Burn is just way, way too good, as we can see right there. Just disruption and lots of area of effect damage. It just works out so well, and it always has. Particularly in retail, where I think it had an extra fireball. So Wingblade starting to come back into this game. Commissar could get wiped in retreat here. Alright, I think he won't get wiped in retreat, but that was kind of a close call. So Commissar has the power sword, has carapace armor, which I've seen for a while and just never really commented on. Carapace armor, it just allows you to use Inspire Courage quite a bit more frequently. It does kind of make it the least interesting of the Commissar's armor war gears, since it doesn't actually change the ability, it just allows you to do it more often, whereas the other two armor war gears for the Commissar are actually very interesting. The Inspire Terror, which allows you to actually use the Commissar's Execute on an enemy unit, which sometimes can even allow you to score some cheesy retreat kills. And then speaking of cheese, there's also the Inspire Determination, which is known for its incredible synergy with Ogryns. At any rate, speaking of Ogryns, we do see the Ogryns out here, so that does make me wonder. We have the Inspire Courage. I wonder if at some point he will switch to the Inspired Determination. But anyway, we got an engagement going on right here. Another grenade will not be dodged. A model does go down. Oh, but speaking of not being dodged, Let the Galaxy Burn comes out again. So we see just how powerful of a war gear that is. So although, you know, I did speak about how one of the relative disadvantages for Chaos in this matchup is that they don't have as high range DPS to pressure the Sentinel in Tier 1 compared to other races. We are seeing some of the other advantages that Chaos does have, particularly that Armor of the Inferno. A lot of the area of effect abilities, Chaos does have quite a few of those area of effect abilities that can be very, very powerful against the Imperial Guard, with Let the Galaxy Burn being the Chaos Lord's ability that's very strong in that regard. The Sorcerer does have Doom Bolts, and he can also use things like Warp Fire. For the Plague Champion, I would say it's mainly the Noxious Cloud. Although, you might be able to make an argument for the Bile Spewer, but sometimes it can also be hard to get close without getting focused down too much if you do get the Bile Spewer as the Plague Champion. So let's see what's going to happen here. Heretic Worship will be allowing the Blood Crusher to move in faster. Commissar Flare will go in. I don't quite like the positioning of the Raptors. They're jumping in. Okay, Malignant Blindness to reduce their vision. disruption from the Blood Crusher, but that also means now it doesn't really have a way out. So instead it will be the Havoc covering its retreat. Let the Galaxy Burn goes in, but it only hits the Ogryns. And the Ogryns in a much stronger position, just a unit that's much more able to weather the storm of that ability, can afford to be knocked down, and obviously has quite a bit higher health per model compared to the Guardsman squads. So 2 Guardsmen with Plasma, 1 with a Flamer. That Flamer Guardsman squad is the one that is less useful for engagement, so we can see that's why it is on capping duty. So Blood Crusher goes in, and DanielGrushin still does not have a huge counter to this. Okay, we are seeing the suppression from the Havoc as well as the Tzeentch used. Okay, that was the switch to the Inspired Determination. Did in fact switch those War Gears, and that increases the speed as well as makes the Ogryns immune to suppression. And instead of finishing off the Blood Crusher, they're going to finish off the Havoc. They don't finish off the Havoc. Oh my god, they're going to get wiped in retreat instead. Wow, that was a rough engagement. That also really... Oh my god. So I think now we're starting to see some of the pain that that Imperial Guard players do have to face in this matchup. So, I mean, I would say it's not really about the Ogryns dying there. The Ogryns dying is more just, I think, how that engagement was handled, and DanielGrushin hoping to score a kill, but ultimately overextending for it. But it's mostly, yeah, I mean, that Let the Galaxy Burn is one thing. Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines out here with the Mark of Tzeentch to really melt those Ogryns, and especially when combined with the suppression from the Havoc. So DanielGrushin is now actually struggling quite a bit, I would say. You know, he started out with that strong lead, but Wingblade was able to keep himself alive into Tier 2. The Blood Crusher has gotten a huge amount of value. Now, I would say, I think one of the issues here is that I do feel DanielGrushin is being a bit stubborn with his builds. He got the Ogryns. At some point, I think I would have liked to have seen him either get a las cannon heavy weapon team or a Melta Stormtrooper squad, since I think both of those would have done a lot more to really deter this Blood Crusher. And this Blood Crusher is really, really running wild. Keeping the Sentinel alive is also something that would have done a lot more to slow down the Blood Crusher. Since as it is, DanielGrushin was relying entirely on his Ogryns for countering the Blood Crusher. They were his only source of significant damage against the Blood Crusher. Now, aside from the vulnerability that we saw them have, they needed to be far up because they were a melee unit, which means they weren't just dealing with the Blood Crusher, they were exposed to the Havoc suppression. There's some more Inspired Determination. So these Inspired Determination going to be doing more damage, but now they're in trouble. They won't be able to retreat. This could be an Imperial Guard squad in a lot of trouble. Okay, now they finally are able to retreat, but one of them, oh my, oh god, huge losses for DanielGrushin. Lost one of the Guardsman squads, and okay, actually only lost one of the Guardsman squads. I thought I saw him lose a Commissar, but I don't know if maybe it was it might have been a squad Commissar from the Guardsman. So DanielGrushin was relying entirely on the Ogryns for dealing with the Blood Crusher, but again, since they had to be far up, they were exposed to the suppression from the Havocs, the Tzeentch fire from the Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines, whereas if DanielGrushin had something, especially a heavy weapon team, which can be positioned very far back against a Blood Crusher, the heavy weapon team is something that would make it very, very difficult for the Blood Crusher to play as aggressively as it did, since Wingblade was often using the Blood Crusher charge aggressively. Now, if he used the Blood Crusher charge in and found himself charging into a las cannon, that could be the end of the Blood Crusher. And even if it isn't the end of the Blood Crusher, he would find himself in a situation where, in the future, he would have to save the charge for getting out instead of using it so aggressively. Melta Stormtroopers would have the advantage of the Melta Bomb, so that would provide a targeted snare, and as well as just good damage. I mean, all things considered, I think between the Melta Stormtroopers and the Last Cannon heavy weapon team, I think it's actually pretty even. A slight preference for the heavy weapon team. But obviously, we're talking about something that is long gone now. And at this point, Wingblade, with obviously a much bigger army, is being quite oppressive at the moment. Not going as far to attempt a triple cap, since triple caps on this map are a little bit difficult to get, given the terrain you have to walk around to get the opponent's natural victory point. I don't know if I actually really don't like the Chaos Lord going around trying to just be a capping unit, when I think Let the Galaxy Burn has such an important impact in engagements. He's probably going to find himself in a situation now where he's going to have to retreat the Chaos Lord, which means that this paves the way for DanielGrushin to actually just move into the middle and actually just take the victory point. Whereas I really would have rather Wingblade been able to keep the Chaos Lord out on the field, and as these guardsmen approach, as these stormtroopers approach, and especially... Oh, wow, we got... I was going to say the suppression from the Raptors, but not when they're equipped with meltaguns. I wanted to just see the Chaos Lord ready for this engagement, but it looks like Wingblade might be able to handle it anyway. Blood Crusher's in here. I think the Blood Crusher will die. Yeah, the Blood Crusher's dead no matter what here. So it's more just about how much damage can it do before it goes down. Where's this Imperial Abyss going? Imperial Abyss. Okay, Imperial Abyss will actually wipe one of the guardsmen squads, and at this point in the game, that might actually not be such a bad thing. Now we've got a Corn Predator. Corn Predator, reasoning for that is that the bolters will also get the increased damage, which means it's going to really melt those guardsmen. Corn Predator at this moment, will it win against the Vanquisher Lehman Russ, or will the Vanquisher Lehman Russ get enough repairs? And it won't. And at this point, this is looking like it's going to be the game in favor of DanielGrushin. No, just kidding. I mean, it's one of those times when I mean literally the opposite of what I just said. Should be the game. Yeah, it's going to be a dead Commissar as well. I'm pretty sure that's the end of the game. Like, just straight up. I don't see... At this point, it's mostly a rocket run for fun. I don't know if he even kills the heretics. Doesn't even kill the heretics with the rocket run. Yeah, I think that's pretty much game. Kind of short and sweet. DanielGrushin hasn't conceded yet, but he doesn't have a whole lot of time to get back out on the field. Wingblade's Chaos Lord going to be getting the decaps to make things move a little bit faster, especially if it does end up being a triple cap. I think the Chaos Lord can even just... Okay, I was going to say, I think he can just tank the damage from the guardsmen and get the full cap. Instead, he decides to Let the Galaxy Burn to get them off the field. All right. Yeah, that will be the end of the game. So, obviously, I mean, the way that matchup was played definitely made it look extremely hard for DanielGrushin once he got to Tier 2. And although, yeah, I mean, this matchup probably in the end does favor Chaos, I do think there were also ways in which DanielGrushin played a little too much into the Chaos Lord, going with that heavy guardsman build. If anything, this is almost a game where I would consider the idea of going double Sentinel. Especially come Tier 2. Well, I mean, come Tier 2, it does get a little bit tough with those Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines, but I think double Sentinel also would have done well against things like the Blood Crusher, kiting the Raptors, as well as not giving a squad that's just going to get ripped apart by Let the Galaxy Burn. In any case, that is the end of the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and have a good night.